And welcome to today's episode of The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. Our special guest today is my dear friend, Jen Hill. Jen is passionate about culture, strategy, and execution, and loves collaboratively engaging to help companies grow, operate more effectively, and create teams that thrive. She's a vibrant leader whose 27-year career at a Fortune 200 firm solidified her reputation as a strategic trailblazer in corporate finance, M&A execution, governance, operations, real estate, and investment management. With boundless energy and an empathetic approach to driving progress, Jen has led transformation initiatives to execute and integrate M&A and partnerships, streamline and innovate operations, understand and optimize margin, enhance and accelerate go-to-market models, restructure and reposition businesses, and design and implement governance frameworks. Jen's three-pronged philosophy on growth, creativity, transparency, and engagement shapes her approach to every challenge. She crafts bold strategies to ignite transformation, executes with precision to ensure success, and prioritizes sustainable and scalable solutions to amplify long-term value. Balancing kindness and excellence, Jen believes empathy goes beyond strengthening teams to sparking new ideas and delivering high-octane outcomes. Her leadership style blends receptivity, objectivity, and influence, allowing her to create collaborative environments rooted in trust and ambition. Her curiosity and love of learning are evident in her educational background. Jen holds an MBA in finance from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and a BA in mathematics from Dartmouth. Wow. She earned a certificate in corporate governance from the Wharton School and additional certifications from Transaction Advisors Institute. Jen is also an astute investor across real estate funds and assets, venture capital funds, and early stage companies. She advises many of the management teams leading these investment vehicles. Her acumen is applicable to companies from seed stage to Fortune 500 across all stages of the business lifecycle. Jen devotes her free time to her family, including her husband, two teenagers, and two rescue dogs, and volunteering in her community with a particular focus on ending food insecurity, facilitating dog rescue, we have that in common, supporting education, and building a passion for sports as a youth coach. Her service mirrors her professional ethos, building stronger community through action and care. Whether shaping strategies for businesses or packing food bags for underserved children, Jen brings passion, precision, and purpose to all that she does. Jen is one of the smartest, kindest people I know in commercial real estate today, and I'm so thankful for her joining us for today's session of The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. Let's listen in. Hello and welcome to today's episode of The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. We are here live with our friend, Jen Hill. Jen, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you with us.
Thanks. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. I know that you have somewhat of a non-traditional path within commercial real estate in that you have been an entrepreneur with one organization for the bulk of your career. So let's talk about your breaking into commercial real estate story and how it all got started.
Yeah, sure. So when I was in college, I had an internship in the real estate space and I loved it. I was in Boston, had a great experience working in affordable housing and realized that real estate was where I wanted to go, much to the chagrin of my dad, who wanted me to go into investment banking. But I really loved the tangible aspect of real estate. And so I was able to interview with the one real estate company that interviewed on campus, Cell Partners at the time, and was offered a position in Chicago. Had never been to Chicago, moved to the city and started in tenant representation in 1997, and then ended up staying with LaSalle Partners, which ultimately became JLL, until earlier this year.
Awesome. And I know that this career path has been somewhat winding through a variety of different business units within a very, very large company. Talk to me about what you were able to do to make yourself stand out and to be sought out and given the opportunities that you had to develop such a well-rounded and diverse career.
Yes, absolutely. So I started in tenant representation, ultimately ended up working in all of the divisions of JLL with the exception of JLL Technologies. including capital markets, which is now brokerage, and work dynamics, and worked with LaSalle Investment Management on some early projects related to the US Army account that we had. And I really had the benefit of being recruited into every one of the roles I had after my first role, largely because of the relationships that I had built and the work that I had done, which demonstrated my curiosity and my capacity for problem solving and my interest and passion for all projects across the real estate, whether it was the different asset classes or different segments of the real estate sector, just really loving the sector and showing that passion. For young people starting out, I would encourage them to be curious and explore different parts of the business and really build relationships, even relationships that don't necessarily apply to the work you're doing at any given time. Just build those relationships that you have them in the future.
Yeah. And I think that's such great advice. And I know some of your relationship building was really circumstantial and by chance. Tell me a little bit about how you found your way into talking about the US Army project and a little bit
Absolutely.
about what happened.
Yeah. So I happened to be in the copy room back in the day when we would put together books for clients with different properties. And one of my colleagues was in the copy room and said, any chance you're interested in working on the US Army account? And 2 weeks later, I was in Killeen, Texas, and spent 18 months in Killeen, Texas, working on the Army's first housing privatization project procured under the Residential Communities Initiative model. And really that set the standard for the balance of the portfolio. And it all started with a late night meeting in the copy room in Chicago.
I love that. So that open-mindedness and the curiosity and also burning the midnight oil, which is something maybe that folks want to get away from early in their career, but really puts you sometimes at the intersection of opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I will tell a funny story. When I was an analyst, I think it was my first year, I went down to the DocuCenter where they helped us assemble books when we had a lot to produce. And the guy working behind the counter said, "Oh, do you work on the second shift?" And I told him, "No, there's only one shift." And he said, "Man, you must get paid a lot of overtime." And I said, "No." And he's like, "Well, what time do you show up?" And I said, "Oh, I'm here by 8 a.m. every day." And I said, "I think I'm going to head back up to my desk though, because this conversation's depressing me." So, I think it's hard to do that now. And I think it's hard to really put in that level of work. But the reality is when you do work those 80, 90, 100-hour weeks, and you don't have to do it long, you do it early in your career. But when you do put in those 80, 90-hour weeks early in your career, you just are exposed to so much, and you have the ability to experience so much. And if you've never experienced sitting in the office at 9 p.m. eating delivery, you've kind of missed the experience of that really in the weeds type of early analyst days experience.
Yeah, I would agree heartily with that. And I think those times are really
It makes us
relationship.
sound old, I know. Like it,
Yes.
it does make us sound old. We did walk to work both ways with, no
Uphill.
shoes.
No.
Oh yeah. But it truly was such a formative experience to be able to
Yeah.
spend time. And the people who I still am connected to today are a lot of those people who I was in the trenches with in those early days. And you forge relationships that you can't forge virtually, or you can't
Yeah.
forge in like the 9 to 5 when everyone's there. It's really the people who put in the work that start to build those relationships. And again, it's early in your career. You don't have to be doing that into your 30s, 40s, and 50s. But in your 20s, I would say if you have that opportunity, take it.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And I know the project that you mentioned, the US Army privatization project, was massive. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about the scale and the scope, the timeline, And it's just fascinating to me because this is such a niche of commercial real estate that I bet folks are not, even if they are pros in commercial real estate like you are, they're probably not thinking about all of the various different types of commercial real estate associated with the armed forces, with the government. Tell us a little bit about that project.
Sure. And I think there have been some movements recently with some acquisitions that have put this at the forefront of people's minds because it is so resilient and
Mm-hmm.
it's countercyclical or
Mm-hmm.
tends to be countercyclical to have work with the government relative to traditional real estate cycles. But
Mm-hmm.
back in the day, when we started with a very small contract with the US Army, we were helping them look at the privatization of their family housing, single service member housing, and ultimately their lodging facilities.
Mm-hmm.
And we built the relationship with the Army really one project at a time, working through how to bring developers on board and establish 50-year relationships between the developers and the Army that were focused on improving the quality of housing for service members and their families and for single service members, and then really thinking through how to maintain that quality
Mm-hmm.
longer term. There have been a number of projects over the last century focused on improving housing. One thing they all missed was the longer term investment management of that. So
Mm-hmm.
you can build great housing, but you still have to maintain it. And
Mm-hmm.
so our focus was not just on the structuring and bringing online nice housing, but also rehabbing and addressing the backlog of maintenance on the existing housing stock, and then setting the program up for long-term success over the 50-year life of the projects. And the first project, Fort Hood, was scheduled to close at the end of September of 2020 or 2001. And obviously, with the events of September 11th, that changed, but it did
Mm-hmm.
close in the fall of 2001. And so it's coming up on its halfway point in the next year. And really, just the project performs well. You look at the quality of the housing, it's substantially improved relative to what it was prior to these privatization projects. The structure of the projects enabled the Army to bring private capital onto its installations through the ground lease structure and really has brought value not just from the physical assets, but also the experience that service members and their families have in the housing.
Well, as a kid who grew up on base at Fort Hood, I will tell you when I was there, it was peel and stick carpet over
Oh, yeah.
concrete floors. So
Yeah.
it's remarkable improvement. And the quality, I think, is something that has to make you feel good. You know, that these
Absolutely.
folks, yeah, giving so much to our country are going to have more comfortable living situations.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that as exciting as it was to be part of structuring programs that totaled around $20 billion in portfolio value, and from a deal junkie like myself,
Yeah.
that's really exciting.
Yeah.
But when you were able to go on to an installation and see the community centers where families were able to gather together, or the pools that the kids were able to use, or the fact that the lawns were being taken care of when soldiers were deployed. So it took one less burden off the experience of the families that were back home. It really, I mean, that really is the intangible value of what we helped create, and very meaningful. I mean, it's also one of the things I love about real estate in
Mhm.
general. When you think about any asset class,
Mhm.
it's providing some type of value to people. And if you really think of it that way,
Mhm.
it encourages you to do your best on a transaction or to manage a property better when you think about the fact that somebody's living here or somebody has to come here every day for work, and let's make it the safest and most comfortable place for them. And there's so much, when real estate is really where people live, breathe, operate, work,
Mhm.
shop. You look at what the impact of real estate is and the impact of good projects is. And it's just so meaningful. But the Army was one that it was easy to bring that point home.
Absolutely. And I know there was an energy component to that as well. And
Absolutely.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that and also how you were able to figure out how to model out projects for that life cycle. Because I'm
Yeah,
thinking about multifamily specifically, and we know that the depreciation of a multifamily asset is usually complete after what, like 27, 28 years, something like that. So how are you able to manage that in a 50-year kind of cycle, and also tell us about that energy component?
sure. So I'll start with the rounding out the housing.
Mhm,
Interestingly, a lot of the projects that we looked at initially, the developers coming into the projects, and these are big name developers, but the
mhm,
developers coming in were coming at it from a multifamily background.
mhm,
And so they're saying, hey, look, the rating agencies are going to require us to have 250 in capital reserves or $300
mhm,
a year in capital reserves. So we're going to model that.
mhm,
And I remember at one point I was in Hawaii with one of our partners and we're sitting in a conference room talking about the financial model. And I said, okay, what does the refrigerator cost and how often do we have to replace it? And and unlike multifamily where the square footage might be 1,000 square feet, the
mhm,
average square footage on many of these installations was going to be 1,800 to 2,100 square feet. So
mhm,
what does it cost to recarpet a space of 2,100 square feet? And you start going through that math and adding those pieces up, and you realize that you really need capital reserves of much higher than 250 or
mhm,
$300 a year. So we were very thoughtful about all
mhm,
aspects of the projects and thinking about if we build a community center, what does it take to operate that community center? What's the staffing that's required? What's the team or what are the operating expenses
mhm,
associated with it? But when you look at those expenses, they're different than multifamily, right?
mhm,
If you're talking about a community where the average number of kids in a house is two and a half, that's
mhm,
very different than most multifamily properties that you would have. And
mhm,
so the wear and tear on the community facilities is higher. So going through that process really allowed us to be more precise. And
mhm,
then you start layering in similar concepts of how often do we have to renovate, rehab the houses and the community facilities and the likes. And it allows you to get a fairly reasonable pro forma
mhm.
for the 50 years. Now, we all know that your model is wrong on day one
Yeah.
because something's going to be different. But just having that mindset of thinking through that 50 years and planning that out, knowing that there are things that are going to happen. If we think about what's happened since we structured Fort Hood, we've
Mhm,
had the global financial crisis, we've had the pandemic, and so we've had conflicts that
mhm,
have brought soldiers away from the installations. And so when you think about those different incidents or situations that have
mhm,
occurred, the real value of what we built was also in the legal agreements. We built a lot of exit strategies. So we couldn't tell you what was going to happen, but we could plan for flexibility in the transactions. Because when you have a 50-year deal, if you don't plan for that flexibility, you're going to put too much stress on the deal in a way that at some point that deal is going to go into distress. And so by building in exit strategies and not saying exit the transaction, but how do
mhm,
you basically build relief valves in that as you've got enough reserves or you've got the right terms and conditions related to the loan obligations or you have the right structure for equity
mhm,
so that you're not creating a windfall for any partner. As you look at all of those components, you can build a very resilient deal that can survive and thrive over the course of 50 years. And I think if you talk to any of the developers on these projects, they have received fair returns and meaningful returns on these projects at the same time that service members and their families have achieved substantially improved quality of life. And so that ability to both create monetary value and create qualitative value in the same transaction over a long term just requires a lot of planning and deliberate structuring of a transaction. So then your second question was around energy. And we at JLL and our public institutions was the team that I was on. We advised the Army on the real estate and financial aspects of their Office of Energy Initiatives, which executed utility scale renewable energy programs. And so similar approach to what we were doing with housing privatization, but in an entirely different asset class and with very different technical structures and models. So the Army was seeking to build resilience on installations and reduce the reliance on the grid through utility scale renewable energy projects. And my role was serving as senior advisor for real estate and finance in the early days of the formation of the program.
And tell me from the beginning of the program and kind of where you were at in your career in terms of years experience to the end of the program, what was that timeline like?
Yeah. So with the overall work we did with the Army, I joined that team when I was probably 25. I was still living in Chicago at the time. I think it was 24 actually, still living in Chicago at the time, and was an analyst. And when I left that team in 2015 to take another role within JLL, I was a managing director and had a pretty substantial team of about 65 individuals. Really enjoyed having been able to grow into managerial responsibilities and building and running a team and helping nurture the careers of younger, early stage career analysts as well.
I love that. And I know that that is a thread that runs through your entire career. I guess I have one question and then a follow up. And the first question is the career path that you've had and the tenure that you've had within JLL is almost unheard of these days. You don't
Yeah.
see a lot of folks who are that franchise player with one organization their entire career. Do you think those opportunities still exist? I guess is the first question. And if they do exist, or if someone does have those aspirations, what can they do to be the entrepreneur within an organization that consistently grows and stretches and is able to work on these kinds of massive, interesting years and decades long projects?
Yeah. And so I would say to answer your first question, I think that those opportunities do still exist, although I would encourage people at the earlier stages of their career to definitely be exploring opportunities both within and outside of an organization. I think the industry has changed substantially since I joined LaSalle Partners in 1997. And those changes have created a more dynamic market where I think that sometimes your value, both to your clients and to yourself, are better found outside of the organization you're currently in. For someone who does want to pursue something that's a longer term career with a single organization, I would say a few things. One, we've already talked about open-mindedness, and I think you have to really be open-minded and be looking for opportunities and raise your hand when you see something. I think that can also be a good indicator of whether the company is a company where longevity is a valuable proposition. So if you raise your hand and you've got this great idea and there's not a lot of receptivity to it, I think it's probably worth exploring whether that's the place that you want to be. If there is receptivity to it, I think, again, building those relationships within the organization is just so critical. And I think figure out how to be an entrepreneur, which is very similar to being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
just have the backing of a larger organization. So as you're exploring and you're able to pursue one of those ideas, really do dive into what does this mean? How do we grow at this rate? When we think about a lot of the individuals who pursued flexible space opportunities 7 or 8 years ago during the heyday of WeWork,
Mm-hmm.
again, that was a great opportunity for people to say, hey, I want to lean into this and explore it. But I think you also have to truly understand the market and the context of the market, because as we all know, those dynamics have changed and shifted since 7 or 8 years ago. Now, I think people who are entering into the data center sector and really leaning into growing businesses within the data center within a larger organization are in a similar boat. And I think it's important to have the agility to both stay with that longer term. The public institutions team that a group of 5 of us founded within JLL is thriving and is one of the strongest and most profitable parts of the JLL organization today. Whereas the flexible space functions in major corporations are all starting to be sunset if they haven't already. So if you're looking at something like that, make sure you understand the market and the context of the market, and you are able to pivot as needed if the market shifts away from whatever trend or capability it is that you're leaning into.
Such a good point. And I can see another example of that, which would maybe be in the CRE tech and prop tech space.
Yeah,
As the velocity of transactions slows down, as interest rates have gone up, companies' willingness to spend those SaaS fees on a monthly or annual basis, I think, has been diminished. And the folks that are in those spaces, and it will come back, and certainly AI and technology are here to stay and are going to be even more important to us in the future. But that point of agility and also just having your eye on the horizon and looking out for potential pitfalls or opportunities, I think is a really smart way to approach a career.
exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. So, talk to me a bit about the mentoring that you've done
Sure.
within your career and some of the advice beyond kind of monitoring market trends that you would give to folks that are either interested in being in commercial real estate and wanting to break in, or might have hit their threshold within their current organization and are looking for that next thing.
Absolutely. So you and I have talked about the fact that I have never really had a mentor, and I have a number of colleagues who I have a strong relationship with as effectively peer mentors,
Mm-hmm.
and have built my career largely in partnership with others and have very strong relationships that I value, but I've never had a mentor. And so I look at that and realize that while I don't know that I necessarily missed out on having a mentor because I have those other strong relationships,
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to provide mentorship to others in the industry. And so, somewhat organically, I have developed a number of relationships with people who are seeking guidance and a different perspective on their career, sometimes seeking some advocacy for them in their career. And I really value the opportunity to be a mentor. I think there are a few things that are incredibly important about being a mentor. One of which is just being really honest and transparent in your experience and being willing to be vulnerable about what your experience has been, but also being honest with people about position and where they are and what they need to think about. I think it's very easy for people to seek out mentors who fall victim to confirmation bias and tell
Okay.
the person, yeah, no, you're doing great things. You're doing great things. You should just keep going. And that's not really mentorship. That's sort of like a cheerleader role. I think true mentorship is challenging people and encouraging people to be introspective about themselves, think through what might be holding them back, whether that's something that they're doing or something that the organization is doing, or some combination. When you bring introspection into the way you manage your career, I think you gain so much value in being able to accelerate your career, because you've got a good handle on what areas of focus you have and how you can improve those. I also value the relationships I have with people. And so I start any mentoring relationship by trying to get to know people and understand who they are as a person, and what relationships they have outside of work that are important to them, what hobbies and activities they have outside of work that are important to them, how many rescue dogs they have. So the number one most important question.
Too
Yeah.
many.
This would say the same about us. I would say we don't have enough. But really understand people, like understand the people and get to know them as people. Because I think especially now that we aren't in the office full time, most of us aren't in the office full time, it can be really difficult to build relationships that are meaningful if you don't invest time and energy in it. And so building those relationships where you care about colleagues or partners or employees as people first is so important. And then the last thing I'd say is I have a kind of a theme for my career, which is I always want to be challenged and I want to contribute. And if I ever reach a point where I'm not being challenged, or I don't feel like I'm contributing, or this isn't the area where I can contribute best, then I look for what's next in within my career. Um, and so I encourage other people to do the same, is always think about what are your contributions, and are those the best contributions you could be making? Is there another part of the sector? Is there another company? Is there another part of your business where you could be making better contributions? And are you being challenged? I mean, do you wake up every day feeling like I'm going to go solve a problem for a client or for our company that's really going to make a difference? Or do you wake up every day feeling like, okay, I'm going to go do this deal and that's going to be that? I think if you take those two pieces and apply them on a regular basis, you can build a really meaningful career. And especially if you do that with that level of introspection, where you are recognizing what your part is in both challenges and then driving contributions to an organization.
I think what you said is so important, because inertia inevitably can occur within a career, especially if you've been within an organization for a long period of time, that you might feel, oh, I figured it out. I know how this works. I can put myself on cruise control or autopilot. But I think that constant checking in about your contribution, about how challenged you are, really ensures that you're continuously growing. And so I just wanted to underline that a little bit more, because I think so many of us can get swept up in the day to day and really not think about what is that next thing, or am I starting to lose that quote unquote loving feeling about the work that I'm doing or the people that I'm doing it with. And so I think those are two really good guideposts. Am I contributing in a meaningful way? And also, am I challenged? Am I learning? Am I growing? And I'm stretching that skill set. Two other things that come to mind when I think about you in the brief amount of time that we've known each other but built a strong relationship is that you are a person who is remarkably kind,
Yeah,
but
thank you.
you also have, yeah, you also have this really high standard for excellence, personally, I think, and professionally. So tell me about that. Where did it come from? And how are you able to, within an environment or industry where people can have a lot of sharp elbows, be who you are and have that really high standard, but still be a very exceedingly kind person?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say kindness to me, and I say it all the time, so it starts to feel a little trite after a while, but I think it's so true. Kindness is the most underrated leadership quality. When you hear someone talk about a toxic work environment, or you hear someone talk about someone that they don't respect in an organization, 9 times out of 10, it comes down to them not being kind and
Mm-hmm.
them doing things that are unkind. And to me, it's so easy to be kind. I was raised in a family of where my parents really demanded a lot of us and had high expectations for each of us, but
Mm-hmm.
they themselves modeled kindness on a daily basis towards us, towards themselves, towards other people with whom they engaged, and in very subtle ways. Like they weren't
Mm-hmm.
overly extravagant in their kindness. They just were,
Mm-hmm.
they are just great people. And I realized that I am happiest at work when
Mm-hmm.
I am able to be authentically kind. And as I have grown in my career, I've tried to create an environment where kindness is not just the expectation, but it's really the theme of the teams on which I work, whether I'm leading them or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think kindness, it's such an odd thing to talk about because I think kindness is fairly simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's communicating effectively. It's, again, asking people about the situation they're in. It's recognizing that everyone has something going on behind the scenes that you don't know about and you don't need to know about, but you just need to
Mm-hmm.
know that there's something going on behind the scenes and give some grace associated with whatever might be happening in their world. Um, but at the same time, if you then balance kindness with excellence and a very high standard and a very, very consistent ability to deliver at that high standard, you can create a really great space for people to be their best in their work and in what they do. And it gives the opportunity for people to really thrive and for to deliver the best outcomes that you can for your clients and for the company. And I think excellence is far easier to maintain than excellence plus kindness. But again, I'm happiest at work when I have the ability to really do great work and deliver amazing outcomes while
Mm-hmm.
also being very human and taking a very human approach to how I engage with others.
I love that. And I think it's so important for us, especially as we get more established in our careers and are put into more leadership roles and opportunities, whether formal or informal, to really model that kind of behavior. Because I'm sure you've had experiences, as certainly I have, where the opposite operating system to kindness is what underpins a fair amount of some of our industry. And so, showing people that you can be true to who you are as a person and that also kindness is not weakness. I think that
Exactly.
there's a misconception that if I'm kind to you, you somehow have leverage on me or you somehow have the ability to overpower or hurt me. I find just the opposite, that when we lead with kindness, we attract more kindness and also repel people who have the opposite intentions and kind of mindsets.
Well, and two, I don't think kindness is about always being sweet, right? Sometimes
Yes,
the
yes,
greatest kindness you can give is sticking up
yes,
for someone
yes,
in a room where they're not present, right? Where
yes.
there's a discussion happening about them. And sometimes kindness isn't necessarily just being happy and
Going
sweet
with the
and
flow.
nice.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very different. It may mean saying to someone, you are wrong in this situation, and
Mhm,
you need to be more respectful to this individual. You need to recognize the humanity in this
mhm,
situation. When I think of many of the companies in our industry have had layoffs,
mhm.
and you can be kind in layoffs. And it's not
Yes.
an easy experience, but you can say to leaders, don't let's not talk about these people as numbers. We're talking about them as people who have careers and that are going to be disrupted, and they have families and they have
Mhm,
bills to pay and they have
mhm.
children going off to college or they have
Yeah.
parents they're caring for. And so if you think of it that way, you can really challenge people,
Mhm,
but do it in a way that is focused on what is the kind thing for us to do? How do we do this? And again, it's not always being sweet, and it's not always being compliant and saying, oh, sure, yeah, we can do whatever. Sometimes it is really challenging leadership, and or it's stepping away when you realize that there's a misalignment between kindness and the culture you're in. And so it is not weakness, and it's not, and it's again, it's not always being nice. It's
Mm-hmm.
about being kind. And that's really an important difference. I think too, there's this industry has a reputation for sharp elbows.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that when I was in our brokerage division, or when I was in our capital markets division in JLL, I found that those operated with much more focus on kindness because they are true meritocracies, right? You get
Yeah.
paid
Yeah.
based on what you deliver. And so people are valued for what they bring to the table. So if you are bringing both kindness and excellence, you can really thrive in an environment like that if you're in the right organization. And that's probably different than most people, and particularly people outside of the industry, think of brokers or capital markets professionals as being all sharp elbows. But really, what they want is they want to do good deals for their clients and then be compensated accordingly. And so there is a lot of room for kindness in that situation.
Absolutely. And I think the first step too, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about, well, geez, the culture that I'm in is not really a kind one, we can control what we do, what we say, how
Yes.
we show up. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, and I can put this on myself as well, I was in environments that weren't always culturally kind. And to survive some of those environments and to armor myself up to deal with, the onslaught of the unkind things I would experience during the day, I might have also been similarly unkind. But I think also to that point of introspection and introspection earlier in your career and more often. And whether you're finding that through a mentor or a sponsor, back to the point of speaking someone's name or correcting folks when they're speaking about someone who's maybe not in their presence, I think those are all such important things for us to think about. Especially as women, as we get older in our career, the power that we have in those rooms and the influence that we have, and using that for good.
Absolutely. And I think it's easy, and for people listening, they may say, "Oh, well, these are two women who are further in their career and are in positions where they can easily say these things."
Mhm.
It is much harder when you
Mhm.
are more junior, and
Mhm.
I think but I still think you can find ways
Mhm.
to operate with kindness. And I would say, don't ever compromise your values for an
Mhm.
organization.
Yes.
That's a cultural deficit at that point, and you're not going to
Yeah.
change the culture. I mean, frankly, I'm still learning that you're not going to change the culture of an organization.
Yes.
But know that, and
Mhm.
know that if you are in a situation where your values, and my values are kindness and excellence, others may have
Mhm.
different values, but if your values
Mhm.
aren't reflected in the organization
Mhm.
and you take a pass at
Mhm.
changing that, or you try to stay true to those values and you can't, it's time to find another organization. And that is
Yeah.
really easy to say, but it's more difficult to execute in an environment like the job market we're in today. But look for those opportunities and to align yourself with a strong cultural organization, because the dividends that will pay over the
Mhm.
course of your career
Mhm.
are substantial. And again, it may take bearing with an existing situation, it may take having a longer time until you find a role or taking an interim role. But ultimately, if you can find an organization that reflects your values, you will thrive, the organization will thrive, and
Mhm.
your clients will just reap the benefits by multitudes. I think there's real power in true alignment of values.
Absolutely. And if you are listening and you're thinking, oh, it's so easy to be Allison and Jen, it's not always so easy. The other thing I would say too, back to your original point on relationships, you can find and attract those people who have those aligned values. And I know in every culture that I was in that was challenging, there were people who aligned with me
Absolutely.
and felt similarly. And one of the things I've noticed about you through getting to know you and connecting with folks that are connected to you is that good people know good people. And
Absolutely.
if you can start sooner as opposed to later and collecting great people that you align with, that will do nothing but help you as you grow. And as we know, these organizations that we're a part of and have been a part of are collections of people who've been at other organizations. And so if you decide commercial real estate is that industry for you that you want to be in long term, and I hope that you do, the the years that go by for me personally just get better because the people that I've worked with come back around. There are new opportunities to collaborate. There's shared experiences in the trenches. I know that you have strong relationships from that Army project that are
Exactly.
life-giving. So, yeah,
Yeah,
such
and I
great
would
points.
say, I would say build your relationships. And if you're kind, people want to come back and
Yes.
invest time to engage with you. Over the past week, I've had lunch with two of my colleagues from working on the Army projects, and it's just like no time has passed. I had a post on LinkedIn, and a friend of mine from business school who I haven't spoken to in 18 years reached out, and he and I caught up. And now I have the opportunity to connect him with another former colleague who's at a different organization who's looking for help in a very specific project. So you can build so many amazing relationships. My brother is in the business of relationships and networking, and he will always tell you build your network before you need it. But I would actually say cultivate your network because you already have
Yes.
your network, right?
Yes.
You can look at people on LinkedIn who have 5,000 connections
Mhm.
and they don't really have a strong network. They have
Mhm.
connections, but on the network. And you could look at people who have 1,000 connections and they have a really strong network.
Mhm.
So the value is in nurturing your network, not just having it and having it in place. And I just think that those relationships, if you, again, if going back to the theme of kindness, if you're kind and you have had strong relationships with people, then they're going to want to come to you when they have a new business opportunity and they're looking for investors. They'll come to you when they're seeking career advice. They'll come to you when they have a project and they are looking for someone to help out on that project. Or I've had a few people reach out recently about potentially joining their boards of companies that they have founded or that they lead. And so again, those relationships are amazing. And frankly, you spend so much time with people with whom you work
Mhm.
that if you aren't building those relationships, then you're really missing out on a way to enrich your experience.
Absolutely. Well, I have two questions and then we'll wrap this up. But my question before the closing question is about investment because I
Sure.
know that you're someone who really believes in investing. I know that this is a topic as women that we don't talk about enough. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about the investing you do and maybe
Sure.
even how you started and how you wrote that first check, got over maybe the fear or anxiety of making that investment and made it really happen.
Yeah. So I'll start with how we wrote our first check. I
Mhm.
started on a small scale relative to the investing we do now. And I really started with something that was close to my level of expertise. It was a real estate fund. I
Mhm.
had the opportunity to invest. It was about 12 years ago, or no,
Mhm.
that's not right. It was about 13 years ago.
Mhm.
I was actually home with our second child, who's now 13. So I can tell you exactly when I was. And I was comfortable investing to a certain level.
Mhm.
I understood the transaction. So anytime you have an investment, you'll get a prospectus or a deck that outlines the potential investment. And I really just understood it well enough, but I was also comfortable that I was investing at a level that if everything went wrong, it wouldn't devastate me. It would be, I would be able to survive it. So it was a bit of investing in a learning experience as well. That initial investment did well, and not entirely playing with the house's money since, but I have been playing a lot of house money relative to the amount of money that I've been putting in myself. So from there, a few years later, we actually had the opportunity to invest in an early stage company as a seed investor. And seed investment is great. And it's really great for people who are just getting into investments. A lot of real estate funds or assets have minimum thresholds and minimum qualifications relative to net worth that might be difficult or not within the realm of somebody who's listening to this podcast, but seed investment is fairly easy. I had the ability to invest with in a company that had been founded by a former business school classmate. And so I took the opportunity. I understood the returns. I understood the time horizon for the investment. And again, I invested an amount that I felt had the possibility to give me a good return without being devastating if the company went to zero. Investing in real estate is different from investing in early stage companies as well, because there's probably more risk associated with investing in early stage companies. And so I was fairly well educated in the level of risk I was assuming, and then adjusted the level of investment accordingly. And since we've had a lot of great opportunities to make investments, we have investments with the Staubach Capital Group, which we really value. We were early investors with Jeff and Tyler and the team, and value that. We're invested with Moonshots Capital, which does a lot of really cutting edge investments related to defense and government associated companies. And when you think about defense and associated and government related companies, that's really aligned well to my background. So being aligned well to my background makes it more comfortable for me to make an investment in that. I'm invested with Claire Coder of Aunt Flo. And if you don't follow her on LinkedIn, you are missing out. She is a powerhouse. She is a one-woman marketing genius and really revolutionizing the way that women are cared for in workplaces, in retail establishments, in sports venues, and the likes, by providing free period care. And then we're invested with Grub Market, which is a supply chain, an ag tech supply chain
Very cool.
modernization program. And it's really fascinating. It's probably the investment with which I have the least knowledge about how the industry works. But again, I did a lot of research and really figured out how to dig in. And they were recently named for the third year in a row one of the top disruptors by CNBC. And it's so fun when you invest in companies like OnFlow or Grub Market to see true progress in and disruption of an industry through investments that you've made.
I love that. And I think hopefully some of the women listening to you right now are encouraged and are thinking about different opportunities that they can find for investment. I think as women, we're in one of the lowest barrier to entry wealth creation industries in the world.
Absolutely.
And we're not taking enough of the slice of the pie. We're responsible a lot for growing the pie, but we're not always asking for our piece of it. So whether you're looking at investing in real estate with great GPs, or if you're looking to disrupt existing industries where you might have niche understanding or just values, I think it's such a great message, and I appreciate you sharing it with us.
And for early stage, I mean, you can write checks for as low as $1,000 in a seed round. So there is great opportunity. There are some amazing leaders in the investing space who are really focused on increasing the representation of women in
Hmm.
investing. Kate Braddock,
Hmm.
who's a friend of both of
Yes.
ours, comes to mind.
Yes.
Hopefully you'll
Yes.
have her on a podcast soon because I think she would be
Yes.
phenomenal in talking about this topic. But if others want to reach out to me, I'm glad to talk to anyone about investing opportunities, and not necessarily specific opportunities, but just
Hmm.
how I make decisions, how I think about an investment, and how I got started, because there's a lot of value, and that wealth creation is so important.
Hmm.
And I don't think enough women are taking advantage of it, including at very senior levels within
Yeah.
our sector.
Yeah, such a great point. And we will put Kate Braddock's information in our show notes as well, so people can connect with her and the opportunity that she's working on, which is phenomenally fascinating. Adaptive reuse of an entire liberal arts college campus that they are purchasing in upstate New York. So, little plug for Kate, huge fan, great introduction from Jen. Thank you so much for that. So, final question. What do you hope the women or folks listening to this podcast take away from your story?
Yeah, again, I have tended to be a behind the scenes person. I'm not often the person out in front and leading conversations within the industry, but I've been able to accomplish a lot in my career, and I'm very proud of the growth that I've been able to achieve. You both personally and then on behalf of clients and on behalf of JLL, where I spent nearly 30 years. I would tell people again that it is valuable to understand what your values are and to align your career to those values. And it may take a while for that to really manifest in opportunities or in career growth, but it will put you on a much happier path than if you are trying to go against your nature and your value system. So I really do encourage people to think about who they are, who they want to be, the type of people they want to be around, and then make, even if it's long-term decisions that take 4 to 5 to 10
Mhm.
years to implement, make decisions to make sure that you are there and navigate your career in that direction.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Jen, for this wonderful
Absolutely.
conversation.
Thanks for having
So
me. I
much
really
fun.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I know that there are so many great little nuggets of wisdom that our listeners are going to take away from today's conversation. So if you're listening out there, thank you for joining us for another great episode of The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast with our special host, Jen Hill. Jen is one of the most kind, most excellent, most strategic, all of the superlatives I can think of, people that I have met in my recent past. We have just gotten to know each other over the last few months. And I have to say, she is so wise and so giving and generous with her time and thoughts and encouragement. I think she is a role model for me and for others. And what she has brought to the table in today's conversation, those comments on how you can combine kindness and excellence, where other people might think if you're too kind, there's no way for you to have a high standard because you're just going to get bowled over or pushed over. Jen defies that. She is leading the way, and I couldn't be more grateful to her for today's great conversation. If you liked this episode and like the podcast, please rate and review us on the podcast platform of your choice and share today's episode with a friend who could use it. We look forward to seeing you again soon on The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast.